As a reader, your knee-jerk reaction may be to find a local homeless shelter or charity and make a donation. Don't. Please don't. No matter how sincere your intention, it would be a slap in the face not only to my own suffering, but to the misery of thousands over the decades. There is nothing exceptional in my story. Not one of my experiences is unique. If anything, my suffering pales in comparison to the trauma others have borne from the distant past to the present day. The charities have been controlling the narrative surrounding poverty and homelessness for far too long. John Kirk was a master at it, earning a knighthood for his powers of spin and persuasion. At the same time, he was responsible for the suffering of thousands, needlessly tearing families apart and fanatically sending their children to the colonies to spread God's army and build the British Empire, bamboozling the public with a non-stop public relations campaign highlighting the benefits to these impoverished waifs and raising thousands of pounds to send more. All too often these children were sent into lives of indentured servitude and endured horrific violence and sexual abuse, sometimes even killed. Their letters home often written for them, or in the presence of their masters, preventing the truth from getting out. When the reality slowly started to emerge, the charities responded with renewed force, insinuating any who dared question them were the true villains. Almost a century later, the governments of England, Australia, and Canada issued formal apologies to the families who had been unnecessarily torn apart and the lives destroyed by the aggressive zeal of my great-great-grandfather and others empowered by their own self-righteousness and drunk with the authority of their cause. The home child scandal should have been the red flag to alert people to the dangers of blind faith in the charity system. Sadly, that epiphany failed to materialize. Even sadder, it was not the only red flag. I came to England thinking John Kirk was a family hero. After falling victim to the lies, abuse, and corruption in the system he helped establish, I consider him the family's greatest shame. My experiences opened my eyes. Please let those experiences open yours. By donating in blind faith, you are potentially funding abuse, enabling addictions, supporting crime, and extending suffering. And your contributions are not necessarily providing direct support to the people who most need them. They may be paying the salaries of employees whose jobs have little, if any, direct influence on the impoverished you are hoping to assist. You may be funding studies, the same studies that have been conducted for decades, to present reports, the same reports that have been presented for decades, that invariably blame the government and the parents, and demand more money to fight these twin evils. You may be sponsoring sleep-out events that unwittingly insult the hardcore homeless with the same boorish ignorance as wearing blackface to fight racism or sporting a dress to promote understanding of transgender rights. You may be subsidizing creative ventures that pluck carefully selected representatives off the streets, shine a spotlight on their charity-edited plights, then leave them perched on the same abyss they were found on, with no practical help provided. Far too many have fallen into that abyss, and permanently succumbed to their addictions, their illnesses, their criminal natures, their despair. Far too many have taken their own lives. You are conceivably perpetuating problems rather than providing solutions. The system is not broken so much as it is porous with abuse. It has been abused for decades, much like the victims forced into it, much like the victims who can't escape. It needs change. Radical change. It needs greater transparency, independent regulation, stronger legislation, and stricter punishments for corruptions and abuses. It needs modification to better support people striving for true independence, not charity-approved codependence that can be pulled away at a moment's notice with a sanction or at Her Majesty's or charity's displeasure. You don't need a career in business journalism to know that the best customer is a repeat customer. As more corporations, local businesses, and community leaders are answering the call and using their own pre-existing resources to establish distribution networks for food and clothing and offering practical advice and assistance, they are doing the charity's work more efficiently, cost-effectively, and free of the charity agendas that corrupt the process. The charities, in short, are an increasingly unnecessary middleman. They need to be removed from the narrative, removed from the benefits system, removed from the equation altogether. You don't need charity status to feed a hungry woman. You don't need charity status to clothe a destitute man. They have had almost 200 years to, in crisis words, end homelessness, and they have failed miserably. The causes remain the same, the issues remain the same. John Kirk's solutions remain the same. And his solutions are not working. Please don't support the charity coffers. To be crass, support mine. Support the man, not the cause. Buy the book. Buy multiple copies. And use it to spread the word, not the gospel truth. The real truth. for the writing of this book is motivated in part by a desire to use my occupational skills to finally escape this nightmare I unwittingly joined. Skills salaried charity employees were willing to exploit for their own self-promotion with no intention of payment, while preventing me from obtaining the employment I needed to avoid the nightmare altogether. Donate this book to the rough sleepers that adorn your commute to inspire them to share their own tales of abuse with the traditional media and elected officials, free of charity influence and unhindered by charity-provoked fear. Provide them the hope people will listen, will believe them, and will take action. These are the stories that need to be heard. Seek them out. Share them. Support them. Provide copies of this book to the traditional media outlets who know these stories exist, but find their attempts to uncover them obstructed by the same charities that condemn them for trying to peddle poverty porn in their attempts to uncover the truth. The same charities that take offense when their repetitive self-endorsing media releases are ignored. Remind the media these stories exist, and encourage them to keep looking, keep digging, keep the scrutiny alive. Share this book with your elected officials, your business owners, and your community leaders. Remind them they can follow the example set by others and take a larger role in the issues surrounding poverty and homelessness. Encourage them to take control of the machinery that charities have been operating unchecked for far too long and return them to their rightful place as a single cog in the machine, easily controlled and easily replaced. It was an investigation into corporate social responsibility that provided the initial spark that led me down this path of woe. Let this path of woe provide the spark that encourages local leaders to follow the path others have already forged. Use this book to educate others. Deliver copies to your local libraries and educational institutions, the true think tanks, independent study facilities whose academic professionals have no vested interest in the outcome of their findings. Help this book open more eyes to the abuse and corruption, encourage others to ask questions, demand answers, demand results, demand change. Real change. Lasting change. Put an end to the distracting noise generated by the charity public relations machine. End the donations given in blind faith. End the lies and half-truths. End the corruption and abuse. End the suffering. End the waste. Please, don't feed the brands. Feed a homeless person instead. Thank you.